In the vast expanse of the Milky Way, where interstellar conflicts raged like cosmic fireworks on steroids, there existed a peculiar breed of creatures known as the Kzin. Now, don't let their name fool you. These weren't your average space kittens looking for a ball of yarn to play with. No siree. The Kzin were a warrior race, bred for battle, with an insatiable appetite for violence. The human UFC fighter, like a pacifist monk on a hunger strike. But even the most bloodthirsty of species need a little help now and then, right? Enter the Grozks, the Gin's genetically engineered war dogs. Picture a creature with the loyalty of a Labrador, the ferocity of a honey badger on meth, and the appetite of a black hole. Charming, aren't they? These lovable abominations were the Kzin's ace in the hole, their furry weapons of mass destruction. Our story begins with one such Grozok. Let's call him Fluffy, because irony is the spice of life. Fluffy wasn't your average Grozok. Oh no, this four-legged nightmare had a special talent for mayhem that made his Kzin masters purr with delight. He could sniff out enemy positions faster than you could say intergalactic catnip, and his battle cry could curdle milk from 3-star systems away. Fluffy had been deployed to the war-torn planet of HFY, a miserable dust ball that made the Sahara look like a tropical paradise. The Kzin were locked in a brutal conflict with the Vrek, a species that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a particularly angry cactus. The two races had been fighting over HFY for so long that nobody could remember why they started in the first place. Maybe someone made a rude comment about someone else's tentacles, who knows? In space, no one can hear you complain about etiquette. As Fluffy bounded across the desolate battlefield, his 6 eyes scanning for Vrek to maul, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Here he was, doing what he was born to do, spreading chaos and terror across the galaxy. If Grozek could smile, Fluffy would have been grinning from ear to ear, to ear to ear. But fate, that fickle mistress, had other plans for our furry friend. As Fluffy charged towards a Vrek outpost, his powerful legs pumping like pistons, he failed to notice the cleverly disguised Minai field. In Fluffy's defense, when you're genetically engineered to be a living weapon, subtlety isn't exactly your strong suit. Boom! The explosion sent Fluffy flying through the air like a hairy, genetically modified firework. He landed with a sickening thud, his body broken and battered. As he lay there whimpering in pain, Fluffy couldn't help but think, well, this is a fine mess you've gotten yourself into, old boy. Should stuck to chasing space squirrels. The battle raged on around him, but Fluffy was no longer a part of it. He was just another piece of collateral damage in this endless, pointless war. The Kzin forces pushed forward, leaving their wounded war dog behind without so much as a backwards glance. After all, why waste time on a broken tool when you've got perfectly good ones to use? As Fluffy lay there, his life fluids slowly leaking onto the barren ground, he had an epiphany. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than mindless violence and destruction. Perhaps he could have been a therapy dog, helping stressed-out aliens deal with their cosmic anxiety. Or maybe a search and rescue Grozek, using his enhanced senses to find lost space travelers. Heck, with his intimidating appearance, he could have made a killing in the intergalactic bouncer business. But it was too late for career changes now. Fluffy closed his eyes, resigned to his fate. He'd lived by the sword well, teeth and claws, but you get the idea, and now he was going to die by it. As consciousness began to slip away, Fluffy's last thought was, I hope I at least get a decent epitaph. Here lies Fluffy, he was a good boy, at being bad. Just as Fluffy was about to slip into the great beyond, he heard something. At first he thought it was the sound of the afterlife calling, hopefully a place with lots of cosmic fire hydrants and infinite treats. But no, this sound was different. It was laughter. Fluffy cracked open one of his eyes, the one that wasn't swollen shut, and saw something he'd never seen before. Humans. A group of them, to be precise, decked out in mismatched armor that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts, and a healthy dose of optimism. Now, Fluffy had heard of humans before. The Kzin considered them to be a joker species so pathetically weak that they weren't even worth conquering. Fluffy's masters had described humans as soft, fleshy creatures with no natural defenses and a disturbing tendency to solve problems by talking things out, instead of resorting to good old-fashioned violence. In short, everything a self-respecting kin despised. But these humans, they were different. They moved with a confidence that bordered on insanity, laughing and joking as plasma bolts whizzed past their heads. It was as if they didn't realize they were in the middle of a war zone, or maybe they just didn't care. The leader of the group, a tall woman with a wild mane of red hair and more scars than intact skin, spotted Fluffy. She sauntered over, casually dodging enemy fire, as if it were nothing more than a light drizzle. Well, she said, her voice a mix of amusement and genuine curiosity. What do we have here? Looks like someone's pet science experiment had a bit of a rough day. Fluffy growled weakly, trying to summon up some of his old ferocity. It came out sounding more like a deflating balloon than the terrifying war cry he was going for. The woman laughed, a sound that was somehow both mocking and warm at the same time. Oh, aren't you just the scariest little thing? I bet you make all the other genetically engineered abominations tremble in their boots, or paws, or whatever it is you've got down there. She turned to her companions, a motley crew that looked like they'd been assembled from the reject pile of a dozen different species. What do you say, gang? Should we put this poor bastard out of his misery, or do we add another misfit to our collection? A burly man with cybernetic arms and a beard that could house a small ecosystem chimed in. Oh, come on, Cap. Look at that face. Well, faces. You know I'm a sucker for a puppy with too many eyes. It tried to eat me, squawked an avian creature perched on the shoulder of a being that seemed to be made entirely of living crystal. The crystal being chimed in, its voice sounding like wind chimes in a hurricane. To be fair, Squawks, you do look rather delicious. The red-haired captain rolled her eyes, a grin playing on her lips. All right, majority rules. Looks like it's your lucky day, Fido, or should I say, your unlucky day, depending on how you look at it. Welcome to the crew of the Happy Mistake, the most dysfunctional family this side of the galactic core. With that, the humans and their assorted alien tagalongs set about patching up Fluffy. Their methods were unconventional, to say the least. The medic, a small, green-skinned humanoid with 4 arms and a perpetual look of mild panic, seemed to be making up the treatment as he went along. Okay, so we've got 6 legs, 3 of which are broken, 2 of which are on backwards, and one that I'm pretty sure isn't supposed to bend that way, the medic muttered midimdarway. More to himself than anyone else. No problem at all. I didn't spend 4 years in made-up medical school to be defeated by a little thing like impossible anatomy. As the medic worked, injecting Fluffy with a cocktail of drugs that was probably illegal in at least 12 star systems, the captain kept up a running commentary. You know, big guy, you're lucky we found you. Most folks out here would have seen a Grozix and run for the hills, or shot you. Probably shot you, actually. But not us. No, we're equal opportunity rescuers. Don't care if you've got 2 legs or 20 fur or scales or chitinous exoskeletons. Heck, we once adopted a sentient gas cloud. That was an interesting few weeks. Took us forever to air out the ship. Fluffy, still dazed from his injuries and the truly impressive array of painkillers now coursing through his system, could only star in bewilderment. These humans were unlike anything he'd ever encountered. They should have been terrified of him, a literal war dog engineered for destruction. Instead, they were treating him like a pet. A very large, very dangerous pet, but a pet nonetheless. As the medical treatment, if you could call it that, progressed, Fluffy found himself surrounded by the eclectic crew of the Happy Mistake. There was Squawks, the avian creature who seemed to have gotten over his initial fear and was now perched on one of Fluffy's less injured legs, preening his feathers. The crystal being, who introduced itself as Prism, was holding up a makeshift sun lamp, apparently under the impression that photosynthesis might help speed up Fluffy's recovery. The burly man with the cybernetic arms was gently scratching behind Fluffy's ears, all 4 of them. See? He's not so bad. Just a big old softy, aren't you, boy? Yes, you are. Who's a good interstellar killing machine? You are. Fluffy, much to his own surprise, found himself enjoying the attention. This was new. The Kzin had never shown him affection, viewing him as nothing more than a tool, a weapon to be used and discarded. But these humans and their alien friends, they were treating him like he mattered, like he was more than just the sum of his genetically engineered parts. As the day wore on and the battle continued to rage around them, largely ignored by the Happy Mistake crew, who seemed to view mortal peril as more of a mild inconvenience than anything else, Fluffy found himself opening up to these strange beings. He even managed to communicate, in a series of growls and yips, some of his life story. The captain, who had introduced herself as Jack, short for Jacqueline, but only my mother and people I'm about to shoot call me that, listened with rapt attention. So, let me get this straight, she said, taking a swig from a flask that smelled like it could strip paint. You were created in a lab, trained to be the perfect killing machine, and then tossed aside the moment you got injured. Well, ain't that just the epitome of corporate efficiency? Remind me to send a strongly worded letter to the Kin's HR department, preferably attached to a bomb. Fluffy whined softly, a sound that conveyed years of pent-up frustration and loneliness. The crew of the Happy Mistake exchanged looks of understanding and sympathy. They knew what it was like to be outcasts, to be considered expendable by the powers that be. Well, that settles it, Jack declared, clapping her hands together. You're coming with us, big guy. The Happy Mistake could use a mascot, and I've always wanted a pet that could help us raid Vrek supply depots. It'll be just like having a dog back on Earth, except instead of fetching sticks, you'll be fetching plasma rifles and experimental weaponry. Same difference, really. And just like that, Fluffy found himself with a new family. A weird, dysfunctional, probably not entirely sane family, but a family nonetheless. As the humans finished patching him up using a combination of advanced medical technology, duct tape, and what appeared to be chewing gum, Fluffy felt something he'd never experienced before: hope. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Fluffy adjusted to life aboard the Happy Mistake. The ship itself was a patchwork monstrosity that seemed to defy the laws of physics, held together by equal parts cutting-edge technology and stubborn refusal to acknowledge reality. Fluffy's first challenge was simply navigating the ship's corridors. Designed with a dizzying array of alien physiologies in mind, the layout was less user-friendly and more sadistic maze designer's magnum opus. More than once, Fluffy found himself stuck in passageways clearly meant for beings much smaller or much more gelatinous than himself. "Don't worry about it," big guy Jack reassured him after having to extract him from a particularly tight spot. "Took me 3 months to figure out how to get to the bathroom without ending up in the engine room. And I'm the one who designed this flying death trap." Life aboard the Happy Mistake was never dull. The crew, a mishmash of species from across the galaxy, had a talent for finding trouble that bordered on the supernatural. They seemed to attract chaos like a magnet attracts metal, or like a Kzin attracts war crimes charges. There was the time they tried to smuggle a shipment of what they thought were rare spices, only to discover they'd accidentally stolen a cache of highly volatile explosives. The resulting fireworks display was visible from 3-star systems away and earned them a strongly worded letter from the Galactic Peace Council, which Jack promptly used as toilet paper. Or the incident with the shape-shifting con artist who infiltrated the crew, only to find that blending in with the Happy Mistake team required a level of weirdness they simply couldn't maintain. They fled after 3 days, leaving behind a note that simply read, "You're all insane, I quit." Through it all, Fluffy found himself adapting, evolving. His grosk instincts, honed for war and destruction, were being repurposed in ways he never imagined. Instead of sniffing out enemy positions, he was now using his enhanced senses to detect space pirates trying to sneak up on the ship. His strength and ferocity, once used to tear through enemy lines, were now employed in the Happy Mistake's daring rescue missions. One particularly memorable adventure saw the crew responding to a distress call from a colony of peaceful agrarian aliens whose crops were being devoured by a swarm of space locusts. The plan, if you could call it that, was equal parts brilliant and certifiable. "All right, listen up," Jack announced, standing atop a crate of questionably acquired fertilizer. "Here's the plan. Prism, you're going to use your crystal body to refract sunlight and create a massive disco ball effect. Squawks, you'll lead the locusts in an elaborate aerial dance number. Fluffy, you're our secret weapon. You'll dress up as the biggest, baddest locust they've ever seen and lead them off planet." Fluffy, who had been dozing in a corner, perked up his ears, all of them at the mention of his name. He tilted his head in a universal gesture of "Are you kidding me?" that transcended species barriers. Jack grinned, a manic gleam in her eye. "Oh, come on, it'll be fun. Think of it as an improv class, with the potential for horrific failure and death." Amazingly, the plan worked. Sort of. There were a few minor hiccups, like the fact that the locusts turned out to be sentient and were actually staging a protest against unfair labor practices in the galactic agricultural sector, or the small detail that Fluffy's locust costume cobbled together from spare parts and what looked suspiciously like one of Jack's old jumpsuits was about as convincing as a Kzin at a peace conference. But in the end, through a combination of Fluffy's intimidating presence, Prism's dazzling light show, and Jack's unique brand of diplomacy, which involved a lot of shouting, creative threats, and the liberal application of what she called her peacemaker, a comically oversized laser pistol, they managed to negotiate a settlement between the locusts and the colonists. As they flew away from the grateful colony, their ship's hold filled with crates of fresh produce as a thank you gift, and absolutely not because Jack had helped herself when no. As they flew away from the grateful colony, their ship's hold filled with crates of fresh produce as a thank you gift, and absolutely not because Jack had helped herself when no one was looking. Fluffy felt a warm glow of satisfaction. This, he realized, was what it felt like to help rather than harm. It was nice. Back on the ship, as the crew celebrated their success with a feast of alien fruits and vegetables, and in Prism's case, a nice bowl of gravel, Fluffy found himself the center of attention. Did you see him out there, the burly man with the cybernetic arms whose name, Fluffy had learned, was Brick Boomed? Our boy had those locusts shaking in their exoskeletons. Who's a scary space monster? You are. Yes, you are. Fluffy, still wearing bits of his makeshift locust costume, preened under the praise. He'd gone from being a disposable weapon to a valued crew member. It was a change he was still getting used to, but one he was coming to love. As the weeks turned into months, Fluffy's transformation continued. The crew discovered, much to their delight, that his grosk biology made him adaptable in ways they'd never imagined. Need someone to sniff out a gas leak in the ship's lower decks? Fluffy was your man. Dog. A genetically engineered war beast got a diplomatic mission that could use a little muscle for intimidation. Fluffy could look terrifying while secretly being a big softy, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. Fluffy still struggled with his violent instincts, ingrained by years of Kzin conditioning. There were times when the thrill of battle called to him, when he longed for the simplicity of following orders and unleashing destruction. It all came to a head during a routine supply run that went sideways faster than a drunken wreck on an ice rink. The happy mistake found itself ambushed by a Kzin patrol, of all things. As plasma bolts rocked the ship and klaxons blared, Fluffy felt the old bloodlust rising. "Looks like your old pals want to say hello," Jack shouted over the din, her hands flying over the ship's controls. "Fluffy, my boy, how do you feel about a little reunion?" For a moment, Fluffy hesitated. The Kzin had been his masters, his creators. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to obey, to turn on these strange humans and their alien friends, to return to the simplicity of violence and conquest. But then he looked around at the Happy Mistakes bridge, at Brick, gripping the weapons console with his cybernetic hands, a look of fierce determination on his face. At Squawks, darting between stations, relaying information in a frantic squawk. At Prism, their crystalline body glowing with refracted energy as they powered the ship's shields. And at Jack, standing tall at the helm, a wild grin on her face as she shouted, "Come on, you flea-bitten fascists. Is that all you've got?" In that moment, Fluffy made his choice. With a roar that shook the very bulkheads of the ship, Fluffy bounded to the airlock. The crew, realizing his intent, rushed to suit him up in a specially designed spacesuit because of course they had one ready for their six-legged alien war dog. "Give him hell, boy," Jack's voice crackled through the comm in Fluffy's helmet as the airlock cycled open. Fluffy launched himself into the void, his powerful legs propelling him towards the kinship. As he soared through space, he felt a freedom he'd never known before. He wasn't attacking because he was ordered to, or because it was what he was bred for. He was fighting to protect his family, his home. The Kzin, caught completely off guard by the sight of one of their own war beasts attacking them, didn't stand a chance. Fluffy tore through their defenses like tissue paper, disabling weapons systems and creating general havoc. All the while, the Happy Mistake darted and weaved through space, Jack's insane piloting keeping them one step ahead of the Kzin's increasingly desperate attainder. "Would you look at that?" Brick's awestruck voice came over the comm. "Our boys all grown up and picking fights with battle cruisers. I'm so proud I could burst. Or maybe that's just a ruptured fuel line. Hard to tell in all this excitement." As Fluffy ripped out the last of the kinship's primary weapons array with his teeth, not the easiest task in a spacesuit. "Let me tell you," he heard Jack's triumphant whoop. "That's our cue, Fluffster. Time to make our daring escape. Try to look heroic as you jet back to us. I'll be recording for our video Christmas card." With a final, defiant roar at his former masters, Fluffy kicked off from the kinship, sailing gracefully back to the Happy Mistake as the airlock closed behind him and the ship jumped to faster-than light speed. Fluffy was engulfed in a group hug that threatened to crush even his engineered bones. "That was amazing," Squawk squawked, fluttering around Fluffy's head in excitement. "Your bravery resonates at a frequency that brings warmth to my crystalline structure." Prism chimed in, which Fluffy took to mean they were impressed. "Not bad, fur ball," Jack said with a wink as she helped Fluffy out of his spacesuit. "Remind me to give you an extra helping of antimatter kibble tonight." As the adrenaline of battle faded, Fluffy felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced his past, his programming, and he had chosen his own path. He was no longer a weapon to be used and discarded, but a member of a family. A weird, chaotic, probably wanted in several star systems family, but a family nonetheless. In the days that followed, as the Happy Mistake continued its journey through the stars, Fluffy found himself reflecting on the strange turn his life had taken. From a lab-grown war beast to a valued crew member on a ship full of misfits. It was a transformation he never could have imagined, but one he wouldn't trade for all the planets in the galaxy. Life aboard the Happy Mistake settled into a new normal, which is to say it remained utterly unpredictable. Their adventures continued, each more bizarre than the last. There was the time they accidentally started a religion on a primitive world by introducing the concept of the holy space frisbee, Fluffy's favorite chew toy. Or the incident with the sentient black hole that just wanted someone to talk to about its feelings of existential dread. Through it all, Fluffy was there, no longer just a weapon, but a friend, a protector, and occasionally, the voice of reason which, considering the crew he was dealing with, was a role he found both surprising and somewhat concerning. One quiet evening, or what passed for evening in the timeless void of space, as the crew lounged in the ship's common area after another harrowing adventure, Jack raised her glass in a toast. To Fluffy she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "Who proved that it doesn't matter where you come from or what you were made for. What matters is the choices you make and the beings you choose to surround yourself with." even if those beings are a bunch of cosmic screw-ups, with questionable decision-making skills and even more questionable personal hygiene habits. Here the crew cheered, raising their assorted drinks, and in Prism's case, a small boulder. Fluffy, sprawled out on the floor with his head resting on Brick's lap, felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with his genetically enhanced metabolism. This, he realized, was what it felt like to be home. As the happy mistake hurtled through the cosmos, its mismatched crew dreaming of their next adventure, Fluffy closed his eyes contentedly. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring knowing this crew. It could be anything from accidentally overthrowing a galactic empire to getting into a bar fight with a supernova, but he knew he'd face it with his family by his side. And really, for a former war dog turned cosmic adventurer, what more could you ask for? The end? Or is it just the beginning? After all, in a universe this vast and weird, there's always another story waiting just around the next star system. As it turned out, it was indeed just the beginning. The legend of Fluffy, the Kzin war dog turned cosmic hero, spread across the galaxy faster than a wreck rumor mill on overdrive. It wasn't long before the happy mistake found itself at the center of a galactic movement. "You've got to be kidding me," Jack groaned, staring at the holoscreen displaying the latest galactic news. "Renegade humans and reformed war beast inspire interstellar revolution. I didn't sign up to be a revolutionary. I'm barely qualified to be a ship captain, let alone a symbol of hope for the downtrodden masses." Fluffy, lounging nearby, lifted his head and gave a sympathetic whine. He knew all too well the burden of unexpected heroism. "Don't you start," Jack pointed an accusing finger at him. "This is all your fault, you adorable engine of destruction. If you hadn't been we'd still be happily causing localized chaos instead of accidentally reshaping galactic society." Brick, ever the voice of optimism or delusion, depending on who you asked, chimed in. "Oh, come on, Cap. Think of all the good we could do. We could overthrow oppressive regimes, free the enslaved masses, introduce the concept of casual Fridays to stuffy alien bureaucracies. Pretty sure that last one counts as a war crime in at least 3 sectors," Squawks muttered from his perch. As the crew debated their newfound status as galactic icons, Fluffy found his mind wandering. He thought about all the other beings out there like him, created for one purpose but yearning for something more. The Vrek-foot soldiers tired of endless war, the kin scientists who dreamed of creation instead of destruction, the countless artificial intelligences longing for recognition as sentient beings. With a soft woof that somehow managed to silence the entire crew, a feat previously thought impossible, Fluffy rose to his feet. He padded over to the ship's main console and, with a series of barks, yips, and meaningful glances, managed to convey his thoughts. Jack, her eyes widening in understanding, let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like our boy here wants to start a galactic underground railroad for reformed weapons, disillusioned soldiers, and anyone else looking to flip the bird to their so-called destiny." Prism's crystalline form vibrated with excitement, creating a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "A noble cause. We shall be the luminous beacon of hope in the vast darkness of oppression." Yeah, very poetic." Jack rolled her eyes, but there was no hiding the grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. "All right, crew, looks like we're in the revolution business now. Someone figure out how to sew a flag with 6 paws and a middle finger on it." And so, the happy mistake set off on its grandest adventure yet. They traveled to the furthest reaches of known space and beyond, spreading their message of freedom, choice, and the inalienable right to be a complete weirdo, if that's what made you happy. They liberated a colony of sentient toasters who had been forced to make breakfast for ungrateful organic beings for centuries. They helped a group of former planet-killing superweapons find new purpose as the galaxy's most overqualified construction crew. They even managed to convince a swarm of perpetually angry nanobots to channel their rage into competitive knitting. The resulting sweaters were both terrifying and wonderfully warm. Through it all, Fluffy was their mascot, their inspiration, and occasionally their voice of reason. The irony of a genetically engineered war beast being the sensible one was not lost on anyone. His story sparked hope in the most unexpected places, proving that no matter what you were born or created to be, you always had the power to choose who you would become. Years passed, and the movement grew. The happy mistake was no longer alone in its mission. A fleet of misfit ships, crewed by the galaxy's most eclectic collection of rebels, dreamers, and reformed doomsday weapons, spread across the stars, and at the heart of it all was Fluffy, the war dog who had found a family and, in doing so, helped countless others do the same. As Fluffy stood on the bridge of the happy mistake watching a nebula birth new stars in a dazzling display of cosmic fireworks, he felt Jack's hand scratch behind his ears. "You know," she said, her voice soft with an emotion that definitely wasn't pride, because hardened space captains don't do pride, or so she claimed. "When I first saw you on that battlefield, I never imagined we'd end up here, changing the galaxy, one weird rescue at a time." Fluffy leaned into her touch, his tail wagging gently. He may not have been able to speak in words, but in that moment he didn't need to. The look in his eyes said it all. Yeah, don't get mushy on me, you oversized throw rug, Jack said, hastily wiping at her eyes. Come on, we've got a distress signal from a sector we've never been to before. Sounds like some poor saps have gotten themselves into a real mess. Fluffy's ears perked up, his body tensing with excitement. Another adventure, another chance to help those in need, another opportunity to show the galaxy that heroes come in all shapes, sizes, and species. As the happy mistake prepared to jump to lightspeed, its mismatched crew ready for whatever the universe might throw at them, Fluffy let out a joyous howl. This was what he was meant for. Not war, not destruction, but this adventure, family, and the endless possibility of a universe where anyone could choose their own path. The stars stretched into lines of light around them, and the happy mistake vanished into the cosmic night, carrying its message of hope to all corners of the galaxy. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of space, you might just hear the echo of a happy bark, reminding the universe that every being, no matter their origins, deserves a chance to find their place among the stars. The end, for real this time. Unless the universe has other plans, which knowing this crew it probably does.